I started learning Vim about 3.5 years ago, and ever since then, it's completely changed the way I work as a developer. It made me enjoy and have a lot more fun writing code, and it's something that nowadays I can't really see myself working without. It's a skill I'd recommend to anyone that works with code on a daily basis, whether that be as a plugin in an editor like VSCode, or working with a full-fledged Neovim setup like the one I've shared on this channel. In spite of all of its benefits though, learning Vim as a beginner can be a really big challenge. When I was first starting out, it was a constant struggle, and it was only after a couple of months of practice that I started to get better. This video is meant to be a complete guide on everything I think you should know if you're starting out with Vim for the very first time, and all of the stuff that has helped me the most. I'll be discussing only built-in Vim essential concepts and commands, no plugins or anything fancy. This also means that if you're going to be using Vim as a plugin in another editor like VS Code, you'll be able to make use of almost everything I'm going to be sharing today. You'll see that you can still accomplish quite a lot. I'll be including a link in the description to a cheat sheet and guide I've prepared for this video. It'll have all of the commands I'll be talking about and what each of them do. With that said, let's get started. Alright, so I've opened up a terminal window on my MacBook, and the first thing I want to show you guys is how to get into and out of Vim. If you want to follow along with me, you'll have to have Vim installed on your machine. If you're using a MacBook or another computer that's running Linux, you'll probably already have it installed, but if not, you'll have to install it. I'm going to be using my already configured Neovim setup throughout this video to show you everything, but all of the concepts will be the same as when using just regular Vim or using Vim as a plugin. Alright, so to start working on a file with Vim, what you want to do is type out Vim followed by the name of the file. Let's do file.txt. I'm going to open it with Neovim, so I'm going to do nvim instead, followed by file.txt, and I'm going to press enter. Alright, now you should be within Neovim or Vim. If you're wondering about my Neovim setup and how I've gotten it to look like this, I have another video on that goes over everything I've done to configure it, but I'm also planning on making updated future videos on how to configure Neovim and everything that goes into that. Alright, so one of the most important things you should know about Vim is that its functionality is based off of modes. That's why it's known as a modal editor. There are several different modes that you can be in when you're working with Vim, but there are two that are really important, and those are normal mode and insert mode. Normal mode will be the default and what you'll be in most of the time. This mode is also known as command mode because every single key on your keyboard will act as a command and do something different. This can be pretty confusing as a beginner because if you open up Vim for the first time and you start typing on your keyboard, you won't be actually adding any text to the file like you would with another editor, but you'll see it becomes pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it. Alright, so the first command I want to show you guys is how to go from normal mode to insert mode so you can start adding text to the file. It's actually pretty simple. You just press the I key, which is short for insert mode. You'll see that on my screen, on the left-hand corner, it says insert now. You'll see that a lot of the commands you'll use within Vim have pretty good mnemonics and are short for some verb or some noun. One of the best ways to learn Vim well is that instead of trying to memorize everything, you focus on really understanding the ideas and the concepts behind how everything works. That's one of the things that have helped me the most, other than practicing as much as I can. Alright, so now that I'm in insert mode, I can actually start adding text to the file. So I'm just going to type out here, hello, I'm writing within Neovim. And now you might be wondering, how do I get out of insert mode and go back into normal mode, which is what you should do after you finish writing anything within Vim. And that's pretty straightforward too. You just press the escape key to escape out of insert mode into normal mode. So I'm going to press the escape key, and you'll see now that on the bottom left corner it says normal. I want to save what I just did, so I have to go back to normal mode like we just did, and then I'm going to type colon to go into command line mode. Once I'm in command line mode, I can type W and press enter, and that will save the changes to the file. W is short for write. Now that I've saved my changes, I want to get out of Vim, so I can do colon again to go into command line mode, Q, which is short for quit, and then press enter, and I'm out of Vim, or Neovim in my case. Let's get back into Neovim by doing nvim file.txt, or Vim followed by file.txt if you're using Vim, and press enter. Alright, now I'm back within the file. I want to also point out that you can do colon WQ to write and then quit with the same command. I can do that and press enter. Let's open the file again. I also want to point out that you can do colon, Q, and then exclamation point if you want to quit and discard any previous unsaved changes. So I'm just going to press escape to go out of command line mode and back into normal mode. Alright, next I want to talk about how to move within Vim with your keyboard. To do that, I'm going to get out of this file with :Q and enter, and I'm going to open up another file I have here. I'm going to do ls so you guys can see it. It's TypeScript program.ts. It's just a sample Node.js file. I'll have a link for it in the description. So to open it, you can do nvim or vim and then TypeScript-program.ts and enter. Alright, so the first movement I want to show you guys is by using the Vim equivalent to arrow keys, which are the H, J, K, and L keys. So the best way I found to remember these is that L is the rightmost key out of the 4, so it'll go to the right. So if I press L here, you'll see that it takes me one character at a time to the right, and then H is the leftmost key out of the 4, so it'll go to the left. J and K will be the down and up keys. J will go down, so you'll see here that it goes down the line every time I press J, and then if I press K, which is the last one, it'll go up. These are definitely a little tricky to get used to when you're first starting out, but do stick to using these instead of the built-in arrow keys on your keyboard because they're a lot easier to access on the home row of your keyboard. You'll see that once you get enough practice in with them, you'll start to develop some muscle memory and it'll become kind of like second nature. At least that has been my experience. This is also true for a lot of the other commands I'll be showing you in this video. Also, if you're on a Mac like me, I'd recommend you set your key repeat setting to fast and delay until repeat to short within your keyboard settings, so you can just press down on these keys and the cursor can move pretty quick. There's a lot more ways to move within Vim that'll be a lot more efficient than this. The next set of movement commands I want to talk about will apply to moving primarily within a single line. First one would be the $, which will take you to the end of the current line. So let's do $, and you'll see that it'll go to the end of the current line. The next one is 0, which will take you to the start of the line. I guess that 0 being the first index in an array kind of has helped me to remember that with 0 I can go to the start. I also learned this one recently. Let's go down to line 14. So I'm going to use J here, and until I'm in line 14, I'm going to use L to go to the right. And if you use the caret symbol, you can go to the start of the line, but to the first non-blank character. All right, let's go up a couple of lines. So let's use K again to line 7, and this next set of movement commands will help you get to a specific character in the current line. The first one will be F, which is short for find. If you type F followed by any character you want to go to in the line, so let's say I want to go to this opening curly brace and I type curly brace now, it'll go to the next closest opening curly brace. If I want to do this backwards, then I would use capital F. So if I do capital F and then I do M, for example, it'll go back to the closest M it can find. If I instead want to go to a specific character but I want to stop right before it, I would use T instead, which I try to remember as short for to or towards. So if I do T and then opening curly brace, it'll go right before the opening curly brace. If I want to do this backwards, again you would use uppercase T. So uppercase T and then M will go back to M but stop right before it. When I do this, if for example I'm doing F curly brace, I'm thinking in my head, find opening curly brace to go to that opening curly brace. And that's a really good way to remember it. If I'm using T closing curly brace, for example, then I'm thinking go towards or to closing curly brace. Now let's say that you've executed one of these commands and you want to repeat it once again. Let's use F and then O, and if I want to repeat this forwards, you can use the semicolon. So I'm using semicolon and I'm repeating it forwards to the next closest O. If I want to repeat it backwards, then I would use comma. So with comma, I'm going backwards to the previous closest O. This also works if you're using T, so if I'm doing T-O, stopping right before the O, and then I do semicolon, it'll go right before the next O, and then comma, it'll do this backwards. Alright, so the next set of movements I want to talk about are about moving through words within Vim. A word within Vim is a sequence of letters, digits, and underscores, or a sequence of other symbols separated by white space. We can actually use the W key to go forwards to the start of the next word. So let's go to the start of this line by using 0, and then let's use W, and as you can see here, it'll go to the next word, which is just a opening curly brace, and then let's do W again, it'll go to this I verify options string, which is a sequence of letters. Let's do W again to this closing curly brace, W again to this double quote, and you'll see now that if I do W again, because a word is either a sequence of symbols or a sequence of letters, digits, or underscores, it'll just go to the start of passport. Because a word by default doesn't include the dash, if I do W again, it'll go to the dash, and then W again to local, W again to this quote, and because double quote and semicolon is a sequence of symbols which make up a word, if I do W again, it'll go to the following line to import. This might feel a little bit repetitive, but I just want to make really clear what a word is because I found that to be really helpful. Now in contrast, a word spelled out in all caps, which is different from a word spelled out in lowercase, is simply a sequence of any non-blank characters. To move through words spelled out with all caps, you can use the uppercase W. So if I do uppercase W, I'll go to the opening curly brace. Let's do that again and again and again. And now you'll see that if I use uppercase W, because from this opening double quote to the semicolon, we have a word written in all caps. Now if I do uppercase W, it'll go all the way to import. Now let's say I want to go backwards to the beginning of words. Let's do lowercase b, and we'll go backwards, and you'll see here that we're going backwards with lowercase b, and then if I do uppercase B, it'll go backwards, but navigating through words with all caps. So uppercase B, uppercase B, uppercase B, we're just going backwards. So B and uppercase B, short for backwards, are the equivalent to W and uppercase W, but going backwards. Now let's say you want to go forwards to the end of words. To do that, you can use E, which is short for end, and you'll see if I do E, we'll go to the end of this word, and then to the closing curly brace, and then to the end of from, and then to the double quote, and then to the end of express. And if I want to do this for words with all caps, let's use the uppercase E. You'll see here I'll go to the end of import, go to the opening curly brace, over here, and then again and again. And now if I do E again, it'll go to the semicolon because it'll include all that sequence of non-blank characters. If we want to go to the end of words backwards, then we can use G and lowercase e to go backwards, and then G and uppercase E to go backwards through words with all caps. So G and uppercase E, G uppercase E, G uppercase E, G uppercase E, and on and on. Alright, so the next set of two commands are really handy. They're for moving through paragraphs within Vim. A paragraph in Vim is just a set of consecutive non-empty lines. To move through paragraphs, you can use the opening curly brace and closing curly brace. Opening curly brace will go backwards, closing curly brace will go forwards. So if I use closing curly brace to go forwards, it'll essentially just jump through the empty lines in this file. So if I do closing curly brace, it'll go down to line 12, and then let's do closing curly brace again, it'll go down to line 25 where there's another empty line. And if I keep doing this, you'll see it'll just keep jumping through the empty lines. If I use opening curly brace, then we'll do this backwards. This is really nice for moving through blocks of code within your file, which are typically separated by empty lines. Alright, next I want to talk about moving to specific lines within your file. Let's say I want to go to the last line within this file. For that, you can use uppercase G. And then if you want to go to the first line in the file, you can do GG. So if I do uppercase G, I'll go to the last line in the file, and if I do GG, I'll go to the first line in the file. Now if I put a number before uppercase G, I'll go to a specific line number in the file. So let's say I want to go to line 17 in this file. I can do 17 and then uppercase G, and that'll take me to that line. You can use numbers in front of a lot of movement commands within Vim. So if I do to W, for example, I'll go forwards 2 words, and to B, I'll go backwards 2 words. You can also use this with J and K, which are your arrow keys, which is something that I like to do often. Normally, I have relative number turned on within Neovim. To do this, you have to add it to your configuration, or you can execute with colon to go into command line mode, and then set space relative number, and enter, and you'll see that the line numbers have now changed to relative line numbers. So now I know that if I want to go 5 lines up, I can do 5 and K to go 5 lines up, and 5 and J to go 5 lines down. The relative number option just helps me know how many lines I have to move up or down. Let's turn that off. To do that, you can do colon set no relative number, and it'll go back to the regular numbers. By the way, if you want to see numbers on your Vim and you're not seeing them right now, you can use :set and number. :set no number would turn that off. Let's turn it back on with set and number. If you're on a parentheses, bracket, or curly brace, and you use the % command, it'll move you to the matching one. So let's place our cursor on an opening parenthesis. Let's go to line 17 here and go to the opening parentheses. And then if I do %, it'll go to the closing parentheses. If I do % again, it'll go to the opening one. Let's use $sign to move to the end of this line to the opening curly brace. And if I do % here, it'll go down to the matching closing curly brace. This also works with brackets. Now with parentheses and curly braces in particular, there's something else you can do. If you have your cursor between parentheses, for example, let's go back up to line 17. Let's do 17 and uppercase G. Let's go to the opening parentheses with F for find and opening parentheses. Let's use W to move through some of these words. And now that we have the cursor between these parentheses, if I want to go to the closing one, I can use closing bracket and closing parentheses. Let's move back a couple of words with B. And now if I want to go to the opening surrounding parentheses, I can use left bracket and then follow that with opening parentheses. You can do the same thing with curly braces. So let's move a line down and let's go to the beginning of this line with 0. Our cursor now is in between the opening and closing curly braces for this function. To go to the closing one, I can do closing bracket and curly brace. Note that if I were to be in line 19, for example, so if I do 19 uppercase G and I do this, it'll go to the closest unmatched closing curly brace. So if I do closing bracket and then closing curly brace, it'll just go to the one on line 20. Those are a pretty nice set of movements and ones you can use often. I'm going through all of these movements first because you can use them with all of the editing related commands within Vim, which is where you'll really start to see how powerful it can be. The next set of commands are for moving through screens. So to move down a full screen, you can use Control F, which I think of as forwards one full screen. So let's do Control F, and that moves down a full screen. If you want to do this backwards, then that would be Control B. So Control B is backwards one full screen. To go down half a screen, you can use Control D. So Control D, down half a screen. You can use Control U to go up half a screen. Now I'm going to mention some other movements that come in handy but don't actually move the cursor. So how I like to think about this is that with Z I can change how the cursor's current line is positioned. With ZZ it'll go to the middle, so ZZ middle, ZT, so T for top, ZT will go to the top, and ZB, B for bottom, so ZB will go to the bottom. Additionally, if you want to scroll without moving the cursor, you can use Control E to go down and Control Y to go up. Alright, so the next set of movements are for searching through a file. To execute a search, you want to type out / and then whatever you're looking for. Let's say that we're looking for return within this file. I'm going to press enter and that'll go forwards to the first search result. If I want to go to the next search result, you'll use N, which is short for next. So let's use N and you'll see we're going forwards through search results. And let's do uppercase N to go backwards. So uppercase N to go backwards. If you want to clear the search highlights, you can use : for command line mode and then no HL, enter. If you want to search for the particular word that your cursor is currently in, you can use star to execute a search forwards for that word. So because my cursor was currently on a return, it executed a search for that forwards, and then N will continue down the search. One final thing I want to point out about Vim movements is that some particular Vim movements will add entries to something that is known as the jump list, but it's not all of them. Some of the commands that add entries to the jump list are these search commands I just showed you and the uppercase G commands to navigate to specific lines in the file, for example. Let's say that I want to move to line 83 on the screen here. I can do 83 and uppercase G. That just added an entry to the jump list. Let's do 89G to add another entry, and 93G to add another entry. This is uppercase G, not lowercase g. Now if I want to go back previous positions in the jump list, I can do Control O. As you'll see here, that'll go back to the lines I previously navigated to. If I want to go forwards on the jump list, I can do Control I. I use this quite a lot when working with multiple files because moving from one file to another in the same window should add entries to the jump list, but that's out of the scope of this current video. Alright, so that's it for all of the most important Vim movement commands I wanted to share with you guys. You don't have to be using all of these all the time, and it'll take a while for you to get used to them, especially if you're just starting out with Vim, but the more of them you learn how to use, the more efficient and more precise you'll be when moving within Vim. Now the next thing I want to talk about is actually editing a file within Vim. This goes hand in hand with all of the movements. So the first thing I want to talk about here is deleting text within your file. To do this, you're going to want to use the D key, which I think about as short for delete. So I'm going to move to line 82 here. Let's do 82 and uppercase G. To use the D command, you first type D and then you follow that with a motion. So let's say I want to delete to the end of this line. To move to the end of the line, I would use a $sign. So if I follow up D with $sign, that'll delete from the cursor's current position to the end of the line. If you want to undo a change you just did, you can use the U key, which I think about as short for undo. So U will undo that change. Let's do D and then follow that up with E, which moves me to the end of the word. Awesome, let's undo that with U. Let's say I want to delete from the cursor's current position to the end of the file. I can do D and uppercase G, which would move the cursor to the end of the file. Let's undo that with U. If you want to redo a change, you would use Control R. So Control R would redo that change. Let's undo that. Alright, so with most Vim editing commands, you can type them twice to execute that command on a whole line. So if I want to delete the whole line I'm currently in, I would do DD. Let's undo that with U. I can also do uppercase D to delete to the end of the current line. So uppercase D would be the same as doing D $sign. Let's do U for undo. Note that you can also use numbers before the D command. So for example, let's move to the start of this line with 0. If I want to delete export and const, which are two words, I can do 2DW to delete those two words. Let's do U to undo that. I could also do D2W, which means delete and move two words forward. It's essentially the same thing. Do U to undo. You can also do 2DD to delete two lines, and then let's do U to undo that. Now let's say I want to change something by deleting it and then going into insert mode to type something out. To do this, you can use the C key, which I think about as short for change. Now let's say I want to change the current word I'm in. Because I'm at the beginning of the word, I can do CE to go to the end of the word, and then I can replace that with something else like hello, for example. And then I can press escape and go back to normal mode. Let's undo this with U. Now essentially, using C, you can do all the same stuff that you would do with D. The difference is that it'll take you into insert mode after the command is executed. Another cool thing you can do is that you can use the dot key to repeat a change you've made to the file. Let's say I want to delete to the end of export, which is the current word I'm in. I can use DE to go to the end of the word. Let's say I want to do this again. So let's go to the middle of const, for example, and I can do dot to do that action again. Let's do U and U. Another example would be deleting the whole line. So let's do DD and then let's do dot. And then I can keep doing that as long as I like. I can also add a number before the dot, so I can do 3 dot to delete 3 lines. You can also use a number before U. Let's do 3U, and that just executed 3 undos. And that's press undo again, and we're back to where we were. Additionally, 2 other commands I find pretty useful for working with characters are the R and X commands. R I think of as short for replace. So if I'm over this O in export and I do R and then I type another character, I'm going to replace that O with the character I typed. So let's replace that with, let's say, an A. Press A, and I just replaced O with A. Let's do R and O to replace that A back with an O. If I want to delete a single character, you can use the X. Let's do U to undo that. You can also add a number before the X. So let's say I want to delete 3 characters. I can do 3X to delete ORNT. Let's do U to undo that. All right, the next thing I want to mention is copying and pasting text. To copy text, you can use the Y key, which in Vim land is short for yank. This works the same way as D and C, but instead of deleting or changing, now you're copying things. So let's say I, for example, want to copy from the cursor's current position to that opening parentheses that is in the same line. I can do Y, F for find, and then opening parentheses, and I just copied it. Now let's go a couple of lines up with K. To paste what I just copied, I can do P. Let's undo that. Let's go back down with J. Again, if I do YY, I'll copy the whole line. And if I do P now, I'll paste that below the cursor's current position. Let's do undo. If you want to do above the cursor's current position, you can do Shift P. Awesome. Let's do undo. And again, if you're like somewhere within the line and you just want to copy to the end of the line, you can do $$ or uppercase Y. I also want to point out that when you delete or change text, you are also copying it. So if I do DE to delete to the end of the word, and then I do P, I'll paste that. To switch the case of the current character I'm in, I can use the tilde sign. Let's undo that. If you want to do this with a motion, you can use G and then tilde and then follow that up with a motion. So let's say I want to change the case of everything to the end of the line. I can use the $sign. Let's undo that. Note that Vim also has a visual mode that you can use to select text and then apply a delete command, change command, tilde command, all of those editing related actions, but a bit more visual way of going about it. I prefer to just use my commands followed with motions, but if you like the more visual approach, you can press V to go into visual mode, and then you can do a motion. So let's say I want to do what I just did and go to the end of the line with $sign. That'll select everything to the end of the line, and now I can use tilde to change the case of everything that was selected. This also works with D, C, and Y again, so let's do undo. Let's do V to go into visual mode. Let's go to the end of the line to select that with $sign, and then if I do D, it'll delete it. Let's do U to undo that. Let's say that instead of switching case, you want to put everything in uppercase. You can do G followed by uppercase U and E to the end of this current word to uppercase. Let's do U to undo that. If instead you want to go lowercase, you can use G followed by a lowercase u. So G, lowercase u, and then a motion. Let's do E again to set everything to the end of the word to lowercase. Let's do U to undo that. Remember that U without the G before it is for undo, and then if you use a G and then a U, lowercase or uppercase, it's for changing to either lowercase or uppercase. All right, one really important concept that I use all the time when I'm working with text and editing it within Vim is called text objects. So the really cool thing about text objects is that you can use I and A, which are short for inside and around, to make edits and changes to these objects, no matter where the cursor is within them. Let me explain. So let's say I'm in this export, which is a word, and I move the cursor to the middle of it. I want to delete this word. Well, the easiest way to do this without having to move the cursor, because I'm already on it, is that I can do D and then I, which is short for inside, and then W, which would be the text object, to delete it. So DIW, delete inside word, would delete the word no matter where the cursor is on it. Let's do U to undo that. There's a lot of really cool applications for this. For example, I'm currently in a paragraph from line 78 to line 89, which is a set of consecutive lines that are non-empty. If I just want to delete this paragraph, I can do DIP and that will delete it. Let's do undo. Let's move the cursor down to somewhere in the middle of this paragraph. If I want to copy it, I can do YIP. I just copied the paragraph. Let's move up a line and do P to paste that paragraph. Let's do U to undo that. Where it gets really interesting is when you start using other text objects like surrounding double quotes, single quotes, parentheses, brackets, curly braces. All of those work as text objects. So let's say, for example, let's move down to line 82. Let's move to the opening parentheses with F and opening parentheses. Let's move somewhere in the middle of it. Let's say I want to delete everything within the surrounding parentheses. I can do D, I, and then just type a opening or closing parentheses. Either of them work to delete everything within them. If you want to include the parentheses in this deletion, you would use A for around. So let's do U to undo that. Let's move somewhere in the middle. And then let's do DA parentheses to delete everything within the parentheses and the surrounding parentheses. U to undo that. Let's do another example here. Let's move between double quotes. So let's go to line 86. Let's do a couple of J's here to go down. And then if I do DI double quote, it'll delete everything within double quotes. Do U to undo that. DA double quote to delete everything within the double quotes and include the double quotes themselves. Again, you can use D, C, and Y, so delete, change, and yank for any of these. You can also use visual mode for this. So let's say I want to go over here between the double quotes. I can do VA double quotes to select it. To escape. For a reference of all of the important text objects that I like to make use of, you can take a look at my cheat sheet, which I'll have linked in the description. Alright guys, I know that's been a lot. We're almost done. I also want to mention how to search and replace things within Vim. To do this, you can type out colon and then type out %s / what you want to look for. So let's say we want to replace all of the returns within the file. So return and then a / again, what you want to replace it with. Let's say you want to replace it with hello and then a / and then G. When you press enter, it will replace all of the returns within the file with hello. Let's undo that with U. If you want Vim to ask you for confirmation, you can use colon %s. The % here means to do this to the whole file. If you don't include the %, it would do it to just the current line that the cursor is in, and then / to type out what you want to replace. Let's do return again, do / and then type out what you want to replace it with. Do hello, then /. Let's do G for global, and then C for confirmation. If I do enter now, you'll see here that it asks me if I want to replace with hello on the bottom of the screen. If I press Y, it'll replace the current highlighted return with hello. And then it'll keep going through the file asking me. I can type Y for yes and N for no. Let's press escape to get out of this. And then let's do U to undo that and undo the first one as well. Let's do colon no HL to remove the search highlights. Alright, we're almost done. I just want to mention a couple of other ways you can get into insert mode, which I find pretty useful. If you type I, it'll take you into insert mode right before where the cursor is. Let's press escape. If you type A instead, which I think of as short for append, it'll go into insert mode right after where the cursor is. Let's press escape to go back into normal mode. And then if you type uppercase A, which I also think of as append, instead of going into insert mode right after where the cursor currently is, it'll go into insert mode at the end of the current line. So uppercase A, it'll go to insert mode at the end of the current line. And finally, these are also two very useful commands. If you use O, it'll open a new line under the current line and then go into insert mode. Let's press escape. If I want to instead add a line above the current line, you would use uppercase O. Let's press escape to go back to normal mode. Alright you guys, so that is it for this video. I know that was a ton of information. It can be pretty challenging to learn all of this as a beginner, and it can definitely take some time. Just remember to practice as much as possible, and instead of trying to memorize everything, to focus on the concepts and the ideas behind how everything works and what things mean. Soon enough you'll see that you'll develop some muscle memory and you'll start working through code as an extension of your thought process, which is what I think makes Vim really special. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to leave a like down below. It really helps me out. Leave a comment if you have any questions or feedback for me, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more content like this from me. See you guys in the next one. Peace.